Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release Insane Like Me. Yes, there's a question mark at the end of this. So I received this screener from the PR company for this film. Not sure how they got my email, but that's something that's just continually been happening for me, where, you know, I've gotten some screeners from certain places and then all of a sudden I get added to other ones. And that's cool, especially for stuff like this that is, you know, very low budget independent film. Now, I will say off the bat, every film is worth watching at least once, if just to find out how you personally feel about that film. I was not a big fan of this film. There were some good things about it, and obviously I'll talk about that in this no spoiler review. But that said, I don't make films. I appreciate that people are out there making low-budget independent films, and just because I didn't like the film doesn't mean I don't appreciate what these people were doing, and you could tell they put in a lot of work. I have done short films before in the past, and it is a lot of work. It is not easy. This stuff is very hard. So just the fact that anyone completes a film, I think, is a big accomplishment. And even though I'm going to talk about this film in an overall negative light, just know that I appreciate what these filmmakers have gone through. So anyway, directed by Chip Joslin, this is the individual's first feature film, has done some acting before, and a lot of it was some voice acting, which I think voice acting is very interesting. Very, very interesting to me. Written by Joslin as well as Britt Bankhead, who wrote one episode of the TV show Winchester, which I have not seen, don't know much about. This film, if you're so inclined to check it out, and we should all be supporting low-budget independent films because they need love. It's going to be available on video on demand on Tuesday, June 4th. So I'm putting this up just a few days prior to that. So, if this sounds interesting to you, you can check that out. So, quick synopsis. This is about a guy who has a terrible experience at this house with his friends. People end up dying, and it is believed that he is the reason because he survives. Some other people do end up surviving, but he gets pinned as being, you're the guy who killed everyone. He goes to a mental institution. He eventually gets out, and then he's looking for revenge. Now, there is something else to this. It's not as straightforward as I just put it, but I don't want to say too much about it in case people really want to go in not knowing a whole lot about this film, and I think that's a good thing. I will say right now, this film feels like a more serious Full Moon production. So if that's your wheelhouse, if you like Full Moon films and that kind of quality, that look, that feel, but not as comedic, although there are some comedy moments in the film, then this may be very much up your alley. It's not for me. I really don't like Full Moon productions for a multitude of reasons. But if you're that person who's just like, I love Full Moon, you may really actually want to check this one out. Just saying. The acting, in my opinion, is not too great. There are obviously people in this who do a lot better than other people. It really is a mix. Overall, it's not great acting. It's what you expect for a low-budget independent film. So for that reason, when I do watch films like this, I go in thinking it's not going to be great, and it wasn't great. There are a few people I was like, okay, that's actually a pretty solid performance, but there's not a ton of people like that in this, unfortunately. The dialogue feels pretty unnatural, and part of that is because of the acting, but part of that is just because the dialogue isn't all that well written. There literally are a lot of scenes where you feel like there's context missing. And that's not just from a dialogue standpoint, that's just from a script writing standpoint in general, especially in the beginning of the film. The whole like backstory that you need for the story going forward gives you this really choppy situation where it just feels like they keep just cutting you into scenes that need more context, and they feel kind of like disconnected, and it just gives you this weird choppy feeling throughout the beginning of the film, and you're like, what are we going for here? It feels very unfocused, unfortunately, and like I said, the dialogue is just not very well written. Now, I understand the dialogue really is not easy to do. I've written dialogue and scripts before, you know, from those short films I've talked about doing, but yeah, it's not easy. It's not a simple thing, but one of the exercises that you have to try and do is like really mentally go over in your head, like, how would this sound coming out of someone's mouth? but it gets complicated further, unfortunately, when that person's not, Brad Pitt level performer, you know what I mean? Or in this case, Eric Roberts, who actually is in the film. He does have one moment that I thought actually was kind of like a so bad it's funny, acting wise, Eric Roberts. But for the most part, he did a really good job in this, actually, because, seasoned actor, Eric Roberts. Just saying. It feels very choppy and like it's just a series of clips instead of a full movie early on. It does kind of settle down from that as they keep going, but from an editing standpoint, it's like they had some issues early on and then they kind of got their flow and figured it out as they kept going. Again, Eric Roberts shows up in this and he does pretty well. It's always good to see familiar faces. I know he's been doing a lot of, lower budget stuff. There are times when the audio sounds like it's recorded in an empty hallway, unfortunately. The acoustics sometimes are quite good, sometimes not so great. That consistency element is not there. But, again, this is a super low-budget independent film. I kind of expect those types of things. Me personally, when I was making independent films, had a lot of audio issues from time to time. So it's not, again, this stuff's not easy. There's no real character depth, and the story is very straightforward and not that unique. There is a little bit of an aspect that's kind of unique with this, like the overall idea, the premise of this film, but I don't feel like it's very well fleshed out, and again, the actual writing of the script is not that good. I think this is a situation where maybe, I don't know if this actually did happen or not, but I'm thinking it feels like it did not. If they would have had someone or a few other someones read the script who didn't participate in writing it and give them really good, critical notes about what needs to be changed, what's not working, what is working, that type of stuff, because it just needed more time. It needed more revisions. Like I said, there's a good concept here. It's just the way it comes together, it's not jiving. But that's also the problem with, if you're someone who wants to make a film, you can't pay someone to write your script. You can't pay someone to direct it for the most part. So it's whoever you have coming together and saying, hey, we want to make this film. You just work with what you have. And there is something to the passion of that. It does start to feel like the main purpose of the movie is character banter. Again, going to the writing aspect of it. It has this kind of meandering aspect where it's like we kind of have a story, but we're not like in a rush to actually get to it. Instead, we'd just like to show you all the banter going on between these characters, which isn't great because the characters themselves are very paper thin. There really aren't any like good, deep, complex, interesting characters in this film, unfortunately, which again is going back to the writing. You need more interesting, maybe some really quirky characters, some really like deep intellectual characters. I don't know, just characters that pull people in to feel more interesting than just like, this person likes to party. This person wants to have sex. Like, those are the types of characters that are in this, unfortunately. This person's just out for revenge. That type of stuff. They're just like one emotion for the most part, and it just doesn't work. Being a low-budget film, I'm quite happy with the camera work, I do have to say. They use a tripod when they can, and when it's handheld, it's actually pretty steady. This is one of my biggest issues with a lot of low-budget independent filmmaking, is that they feel like they have to do handheld camera all the time, and when they're doing it, it's way too shaky, and they try and do handheld for the entire film. These individuals, whoever did their camera work, knew what they were doing, and even the director too, because the director has a part in that, saying, yeah, let's do handheld, let's do tripod. Thank you for using the tripod. There are so many scenes where tripod just works best. You want it to be stationary, and they knew what they were doing. So I think the crew with this film was pretty good. I think the actors, mixed bag, the writing not great, directing was okay. But the crew did a good job, because also the lighting was very well handled as well. So some really good technical elements to this film that really did come together. The problem is, when you're basing everything around a script that's not that good, you're not going to, it's not going to be easy to sell this film to people, unfortunately. Character reactions are barely ever appropriate for the situation they're in. Again, going back to the writing aspect of it, there really are a lot of situations that some of these characters end up in, and you're like, this is how they're reacting in this. Like, reactions that should be a lot stronger are extremely subdued. And it feels very weird, it feels off, and it doesn't feel real, even for the world that's kind of been created within this film. The ending probably is the best part of the film, but that's also not saying a ton because it's just kind of okay-ish, unfortunately. Also, it's kind of drawn out a little bit too long, in my opinion. This film, I think with credits, was an hour and 26 minutes. Bravo for not making it too much longer, although they still could have cut some stuff out because there's just a lot of banter going on there. Again, I do this all the time. Point to the film Host, which took 58 minutes. That film was 58 minutes because that's the amount of time they needed to tell this story. There's not a ton of story in this film itself, so cutting it way back would have been a good thing because then you're tightening it up more. You make that pacing a lot better. It's a lot more palatable for people if you don't have a ton of story that's going on. We didn't need, all that banter. Again, this plays like a full moon film. And I really do think that if they would have leaned even further into the full moon feel of it, it would have worked a little bit better. Make it a horror comedy. Like, just make it a straight up horror comedy. The biggest issue with this particular script is they tried to make it serious with having a few jokes intentionally thrown in there. But really what they needed to do is just make it absurdist in the most ridiculous way possible. Just make it an outright horror comedy. When I'm thinking about a film like this, I'm thinking ones that are done well, that are super low budget. Rev and Hawk. Those guys were like, it was this video on demand film. I actually did a review for it a few years ago. Really well written. The comedy aspect was great. They knew what they had to work with. And when you do a horror comedy, it immediately makes people forgive a lot about the production and about the script writing and about the acting and all that stuff. So that's just a really smart way to go, just my opinion. But anyway, out of 5 stars, half stars in play. Unfortunately, I'm giving this a 1.5 star rating. I don't think the film is great, but like I said, I have a lot of respect for the people who did this film because I'm not out there making films, and I do know how hard that is. So anyway, if you're inclined to check it out, like I said, Tuesday, June 4th, it's available video on demand, so go ahead and check it out. And if you've seen it and you want to talk about it, go ahead and put it in the comments. We can talk spoilers, totally fine. Do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I appreciate that. Hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos, and hit the thumbs up on this video and all videos to help me out with that YouTube algorithm. But regardless, thanks for your time watching this, and until next time, keep it brutal.